All right, welcome back. So, step 1 in hypothesis testing is developing a good research question, okay? Now, a research question should be relatively specific, it should be fairly concise, and it should have some measurable aspects to it. So the example that I have here is the general idea of, does having siblings make you dumb, okay? So that's a fine question to ask, but in statistics, we need to be a bit more specific, right? Because this is fairly ambiguous, right? This would bring in a lot of criticism toward any results that we found, right? Because our research question is not great, right? It's not very specific. It is not, it is concise, right? But it's not really getting the work or the job done, right? Where if we look over here, and there's a small typo, this should say correct in the PowerPoint rather than incorrect, but you get the idea. This statement here, this research question, is saying the same thing that this one is. They're both trying to get the same job done, right? However, this one here is much more specific, it is much more concise, and it has some measurable aspects to it. The question is the average IQ, so something that is relatively measurable, of people with siblings lower than the average IQ of people without siblings, right? So we have more of a directionality to it, even though we know that dumb here means that you are less smart than someone else, right? But we're actually able to put some directionality to it to make it more statistically correct, we'll say. Okay? So we've got this idea that research questions need to be very specific, very concise, and have some measurable aspects to it. In fact, they need to be smart. Your research question needs to be smart. And what does SMART stand for? Well, I've stolen this from I think if you're making a goal, not like a soccer goal, but like a goal for your own personal life, they should also be SMART. So this stands for something, obviously. The first thing, and we've talked about it a bunch, is that research questions need to be specific. Okay? They need to be specific. They need to be geared toward a certain group of people or a certain characteristic, something like that. In the last example, it was groups of people with siblings, right? Comparing them to groups of people without siblings, okay? So that's fine. The next thing that a research question needs to be, M, stands for measurable. Measurable, okay? So that idea of IQ, right? That is something that is relatively measurable, right? Still sort of ambiguous, but certainly less ambiguous than just saying, are you dumb or are you not, right? We could even say, do they score lower on like a math test or like a reading test, a comprehension test, whatever, right? We could get even more specific with how we are measuring the thing that we care about. The next thing that a research question needs to be is attainable. 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 Is that right? Attainable. Yeah, I think it is. Doesn't matter. You get it, right? It needs to be something that is not necessarily tangible, but something that is easy to relate to and understand. Okay? Okay? And then, R stands for realistic. Realistic. Okay? Where what you are measuring needs to be something, these are actually sort of tied together, where it just needs to be something that is something that can occur in real life, right? Something that actually matters, right? Because you can test a bunch of different things, but if the differences don't really affect anybody in any kind of way, even if it's a super niche thing in some field, right? If it's so niche that it just is not applicable to anything, then, maybe you got to think of a better research question. The last thing that a research question needs to be is timely. Timely, right? You got to have some sort of bookends on it, right? It's not something, this can also be not ambiguous. Not ambiguous, right? It needs to have something that put some kind of constraint on it. It doesn't need to be totally out there and abstract, right? So all of these come together to make a good research question. And that's the foundation of this whole thing, right? If your research question is no good, then your statistical analysis is going to be no good. If your research question is thoughtful, concise, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, blah, 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 if it's all of those things, then you're going to have a very legitimate statistical analysis. Even if the results are, not cool or don't lead you to any cool conclusions, nobody can rip apart your whole process because your research question was good. Okay. We will call it there. Go on to the next thing. See you there in just a second.